Om Shri Gurubhyo Namaha. So, we did chapter 3 last week. I don't know how many of you remember what we talked about in chapter 3. So, I thought let me connect chapter 3 and chapter 4 because both of them actually talk about Karma Yoga a lot. So, I'll go over chapter 3. So, the first 8 verses of chapter 3 are not really that significant, it's sort of like it gets into the subject. And, so I'm going to start with chapter 3, verse 9. So, in chapter 3, verse 9, it says, "The world is bound by action other than those performed for the sake of sacrifice. O Arjun, therefore, being free from attachment, perform action for the sake of yajna alone." So here, this is where the word yajna comes in. And, Krishnji is talking about yajna here from a sense of sacrifice. He says, for the sake of sacrifice. And also because, in Hinduism, yajna is used so much in the Vedic way. Is there anybody on the phone, by the way?
Samir is.
Okay. Can you hear me, Samir? Okay. So, so the reason why so much of the yajna is brought in is because, now this is 5,000 years ago, and, before the Gita, I mean, the standard or the basis for Hinduism was the Vedas. And the Vedas are, half of the Vedas talk about, these, the ritual of yajna. So that is why Krishnji is talking about a new way to do Karma Yoga, not in terms of a physical yajna where you sit in the fire and you offer. And these are the rishis, and you have to retire and you have to perform these yajnas. Even though rajas used to do it, the kings used to do it, but really he's trying to put yajna as a metaphor. He's putting yajna in a different context and using it as what should I say, symbolic. So here yajna, he doesn't mean the actual yajna, the fire ceremony, the fire ritual. Here he's talking about yajna as a process whereby you do service. You do it as a service, you do it as an offering, you do it as a sacrifice, you do it, selflessly, and so forth. So, this is where yajna first comes in, verse 9. And so he says the world is bound by action. The world is bound by action because when action comes from ego, you're bound. You become bound. Means you gain karmic account from it, you suffer consequences from it, and so forth. But when you do karma without any attachment and not from the ego, not from the desires of the ego, not driven by your vasanas and tendencies, but you do it from a spirit of service, of your duty, because it's righteous, for you to do it, and so forth, based on dharma and all these things. Then it's not, it doesn't bind you. You're free from it. You're free from anything. So I wanted to talk about yajna in a little bit more detail because there is a lot of yajna, in the 4th chapter, and unless you understand what is yajna and really be clear, chapter 4 will really throw you off because it just goes on and on and on about yajnas, So yajna is mentioned in the, like I said, in the Vedas, right? And if you read the Purusha Suktam talks about creation as a yajna, that the Purusha, the eternal consciousness, the all-pervading consciousness, Purusha, that Purusha created this whole Prakriti, this entire existence through a process of a yajna. And it talks about, from yajna came this, from yajna came that, from yajna. So you can think of it in a scientific way, like how when you study quantum physics, and particle physics, and they talk about the energy behind the particle, that there's vibration, that vibration holds particles in place. But essentially that from vibration came matter. Simply put, from vibration came matter has been established by the scientific community, and really there is no matter as such without energy. So everything is energy, and from energy or vibrations came matter. Is that correct? You must have all heard this, I'm sure, a little bit of it at least. So from consciousness came creation. So that is exactly what Purusha Suktam is saying, and all the other Vedic hymns are saying, that from consciousness came creation. Now, this process, this alchemy by which vibration and consciousness creates matter is yajna. You can think of it like that. Okay. Now, when you when they say that perform yajna, essentially, if you look at nature, everything is doing yajna. So in other places, if you read the Vedas, they will describe that Surya, the sun, is doing yajna. What does that mean? Surya is doing yajna. So what happens is Surya transforms gases into fire, right? So it burns the gas and it produces fire. So it as though you offer something, you take something, an element like gas, and when you burn it, it becomes fire, it becomes light. And so by this process, the sun is doing yajna. Now, everything in nature is yajna. So by the way the trees grow and bear fruit, this process is called yajna. The way that the water vaporizes, becomes a cloud, and then it rains, and this process by which one thing, one form of energy transforms into matter, back into energy, that whole process of matter and energy and its transformation is called yajna. Digestion, when we eat, so we offer the food into the digestive fires, and from the digestive fires the food gets broken down into energy, so it's back into, from matter it goes back into energy. So this whole matter energy cycle, this, in scientific way, is called yajna. Okay, so this is the basis of yajna. Means everything in creation, the natural process, whether it's a sun or your digestion or any other work that you perform, anything that's happening in nature, is this natural cycle is called yajna. So do you understand it, or do you have any question? Just let me stop here so that you are clear what is yajna, and I'll send you an article, because I did research on this yajna. I was reading the Kathopanishad, studying the Kathopanishad by Swami Chinmayanand, and there's Nachiketa. Yes, Kathopanishad, right? So there's this thing about Nachiket, and the ritual that he did, Nachiketa ritual that he came up with, and so then I studied what is this yajna. It's very interesting, because when I started studying this yajna, it had a completely different meaning from what I understood it. So all natural processes is yajna, and we'll get into the details of that in the 4th chapter. But here the yajna has to be understood before we go on. So do you understand what is meant by yajna? I hope you understand. Huh?
So indirectly it is saying that any kind of process or any kind of action or work you do is, in other words, a yajna.
Correct.
Good process and good work.
Yes. Yeah. So anything that comes from your spirit, anything that you do for others, because I should point that out. So yajna or nature is always serving others. So like a fruit, a tree bears fruit for others, not for itself. The sun shines not for itself, but for others. The rain, so all of nature, if you look at nature, it is always providing, it's abundance, right? So it is not serving itself, it is serving others. Humans, by the way, are the only creatures that, I mean, of course, animals, you have to sustain your body. I mean, of course, you have to sustain your body, it's part of your dharma. It says it in verse number 8. But it is not, it's not natural to be greedy. It's not natural to have lust, it's not natural to have this kind of hoarding things. So to sustain the body is fine, but sustaining of the body is required so you can serve others. So nature is always serving others. Everything that's happening in nature, nature is sustaining itself to serve others. So when you come from a spirit of this natural spirit, what is in nature, and you become like nature, like the sun, like the rain, like the tree, and all of nature, which is always providing. Even the devatas, they're there to provide. God is there to provide. Sun is there to provide. So when you become like that, you also start doing yajna. You don't do it from your egoistic standpoint or from your greed or something like that, but you understand that your life is of service. You do it from a sense of dedication. You do it as an offering. Now, whether you do it as an offering to God or to your children or to everybody in general or whatever, but it's a sense of service. It doesn't mean that you have to volunteer and not earn a paycheck. You have to earn money to eat, to buy clothes, to have a house, but it is different attitude. The attitude is not based on greed and selfish desire and this, it's almost this feverishness, it doesn't come from this it's not a negative emotion. It's not from this it's not balanced. So that is why you have to be clear. In Karma Yoga, it is not wrong to be a millionaire. It is not wrong to be rich. It is not wrong to have good cars and a expensive house and all of that stuff. But the attitude by which and the means by which you earn it is very important. So if you earn it by corrupt means and you're killing people or you're cheating people or you don't lead a balanced life and you're greedy and this incessant greed, it depends the attitude with which you earn. See, a lot of people have the aptitude and the potential to be a CEO or a president or a good businessman and earn well. There is nothing wrong with it. They were meant to earn well. And for example, if you're a leader type, yeah, you may want to become a leader in the government. You might want to become a leader somewhere else because that's your nature. Or if you're a businessman, it's natural for you to know how to make profit, how to make investments, how to grow a business and all of that stuff. Even in the time of Krishna and Ram were both kings. They were not sages. They were not poor. They were very rich kings and they had huge kingdoms and they used to wear ornaments. They lived in palaces. I mean, they had the luxuries, but you see the attitude. The attitude was not of greed, it was the attitude of service. Because somebody has to run a country and somebody has to serve. But there is a big difference between a selfish king and a king who wants to serve their people. So you see these kings, Sri Krishna and Sri Ram, they are very good examples of Karma Yoga because they show the excellence in the outside world as kings and the excellence in the inner world as being detached, having an attitude of service, living from your soul, living with wisdom. So you must understand Karma Yoga from the right perspective. It doesn't mean that you renounce everything in the world. That is not Karma Yoga. So Karma Yoga means you do everything with the right attitude from being detached from the world. So it doesn't mean, like, see, you can have a lot of money, but you don't have to have so much attachment to it. Like if it, because money will come and go, you know, but if you're attached to it, attachment will cause misery, attachment will cause suffering. So you should not be attached. So like if you crave for food, it's not good. If you get it, it's good. If you don't get it, it's okay. But this craving, that causes suffering. Okay, so it is a very difficult balance to achieve, and that is why these avatars have been good role models for them to live by example and show us what do they mean by karma yoga. Okay, because either people go towards renunciation and they think becoming a sadhu or something. It's just not that, but it's to achieve a balance where you achieve excellence in the outer world and excellence in the inner world. But excellence in the outer world can only come from excellence in the inner world. So, first you have to have that wisdom, that purity, that excellence in the inner world. And when inside you are free, then in the outside you will be free. You will see these examples of people, they are so generous, they are so rich, but they have no ego about their being rich. They're so famous, but they don't have any ego about being famous. They do a lot of charity. They are very humble people, and so there are examples of people like this. And they have earned in a good way. They have not hurt anybody. They have not been this thing, but they were so good that they ended up earning a lot of money. So that's something that you have to take away from karma yoga. This is a very important thing. But this spirit of yajna that he keeps talking about, the spirit of yajna is about living a life of service. So living it from dedication, whether you want to live it, if you can't understand it, a lot of people just want to do it as service to their God, or for others or whatever. But it's a spirit of service that you have to live your life, just like nature. And that by which you produce is called yajna. So that's verse number 9. And then verse number 10 is, in the beginning of creation, having created mankind together with sacrifices, the Prajapati said, by this shall you prosper, let this be your milch cow for the desires, Kamadhenu. So, here the Kamadhenu was a cow, which was a wish-fulfilling cow, was sage Vashisht, Rishi Vashisht's cow. So, one thing, of course, he talks about Prajapati, like I was telling you, right? Purusha created all of creation or mankind from yajna. This is a symbolic thing, this wish-fulfilling cow is a symbolic thing. That time, the cow was it was an agrarian society, so the cow was a providing, source of providing milk, and so many other things came from the cow. So it's just symbolic. What it means, the deeper implied meaning of this is, see, when you become like a Rishi Vashisht, where you have achieved a certain level of purity, and this person, a Rishi Vashisht, who is there for others, who has crossed, who has become enlightened, a selfless saint who wants to serve other people, he's there for other people, and he's achieved a great amount of purity. To him, all his desires will be fulfilled. That's what it really means. That is why he had the Kamadhenu. So it's symbolic of when a person has achieved that level of purity, as soon as that person even makes an intention, that intention gets fulfilled because of the purity of the intention, because nature knows. See, when you walk the path of truth, nature will support you. So a human being who's walking on the path of truth, all of his intentions, all of his desires, because they are sacred, they're pure, they will be fulfilled. So that is what the Kamadhenu signifies here, the wish fulfilling cow. Okay? Let's see. Verse number 11 is, it's very interesting, when you go into each verse, there's so much depth. So you really have to understand what it means. 11 is, with this you do nourish the gods, may those devas nourish you too, thus nourishing one another you shall attain the highest good. So a lot of times the word devas, you have to understand, it doesn't mean the physical deities, it actually means the principle, the element. So devas are really elements of nature. Okay, so it's not a physical, it's symbolized by a physical being, but really it's the illuminating force of that element. For example, Agni illumines the light principle. Indra, the god Indra, he symbolizes the king of the Indriyas, meaning all the five senses, and so the king of the five senses is the mind, right? So these devas, you can think of it like there are so many functions in creation. There's so many functions, right? Of creation, of sustenance. There are like, one for progeny, one for rain, one for, there's so many things that happen in creation, right? Now, for every function in creation, just like you have an organization, you have a financial department, you have this department, or in a country you have defense, you have so each department will have certain administrative heads and stuff like that. So in creation there are so many functions, and the principle or the element that illumines it or keeps it functioning, whether it's outside in creation or whether it's inside in our body, each of those is called a deva. But it's really an elemental force or a illuminating force. So like for digestion, there are 5 pranas, and these 5 pranas will be given some names of some devas, and it's really, and they'll be picturized as these 5 flying devas and all, but it's nothing. It's the 5 pranas that exist in our body, the digestive fires, the whatever, I think there are 3 or 5 digestive fires, I don't remember. But all these functions, whether it is inside your body or outside in creation, they all are managed by a force, a divine force, and they are called devas. So understand it like that. So whenever you hear these things, devas, so when you see, when you invoke that deva, supposing you like for example Lakshmi is the sort of the deity for abundance. Okay, so now if you need help, in finances, in security, in jobs or whatever, in your financial area, then they say, okay, do the Lakshmi puja or something like that. So Lakshmi is not a goddess, she's basically the whoa, the cosmic force that provides. And so there's a force that creates, and then there's a force that sustains it, right? So Narayan, that maintains that. Don't open it if you don't know. Sorry, there's someone at the door.
नमस्ते आंटी, मैं रूपा हूँ, मैं बुक लेके गई थी विनीता जी का।
So basically, because Narayan is the one who is responsible for the sustenance, for that you need the energy to sustain, right? You need food, you need job, you need health, all of this stuff, and that is symbolized by Lakshmi. I'm sorry, just 1 second.
बहुत अच्छी लगी और मैंने थोड़ी थोड़ी पढ़ी है because मुझे टाइम नहीं मिला।
I hope this is not disturbing you. I've got a guest here.
गीता जी को। और मेरी मदर इन लॉ ने पुरणपोली बनाई है। आपने सुना है महाराष्ट्र में पुरणपोली?
So
तो वो आपके लिए लेके आए हैं और मूंग दाल के लड्डू बनाए हैं। आज ही बनाए।
So sorry.
पुरणपोली तो हमारे यहाँ स्पेशलिटी बनती है।
Let me see if I can move.
नहीं मैं निकलती हूँ।
So basically that is what it's talked about in the devas here. Okay.
तो जरूर आऊंगी।
Okay,
मैं
so
एक
verse
हफ्ते
number
next Saturday
13.
वापस जा रहे हैं इंडिया।
Mummy, I'm
कुछ महीने
recording
बाद आ
here.
जाएंगे वापस। अभी थोड़ी छुट्टी के लिए।
So
नहीं, ठीक है, मुझे
the
जाने दो।
13
बस एक
is
बार
the
नमस्ते
righteous
बोलना
who
और
eat,
आप
and
जरूर
remnants
ट्राई
of the
करो।
sacrifice are freed
तुरंत
from their
वही
sins,
घी के साथ
who
या
cook the
मिल्क के
food
साथ
only for
खाते
their
हैं
sake.
गरम करके।
Truly, yeah. Again, this is talking about how, basically, if you do things only for your selfish purposes, then it's no good. But the righteous people always share with others, and it means the remnants of the sacrifices, but what it means is that you do it uh, as part of selfless service to others, and not just for yourself. 14 is saying the food brings, from food beings come forth, from rain food is produced, from sacrifice arises rain, and sacrifice is born of action. If you take it in reverse, basically this verse number 14 of chapter 3 is saying, so why he's telling Arjun to act, he's saying sacrifice is an act. It is not something that you sit, but for sacrifice you have to act. To serve others you have to act. To do the right thing you have to act. To be a member of society you have to act. You have to participate in the world that you live in, and in a spirit of sacrifice, yagya. And when you do the right things, this whole creation can then function. So here it says, from sacrifice arises rain. It doesn't mean literally rain, but he's giving it as an example. So when nature and when we perform actions, only when we do actions can all of existence function, because everything in existence is doing something. The galaxies are rotating, the stars are burning, the planets have certain life forms on them. Everything, there's action everywhere in the universe. And only from that spirit of sacrifice can the whole of creation function. So here it just gives an example: from sacrifice arises rain, but he's giving it as an example that because nature has a spirit of sacrifice, and that is why it produces rain. So if nature didn't produce rain, you would not have food, and if you didn't have food, you would not be able to sustain life, right? So you see how the chain, in nature you see the food cycle, right? Everything in nature has a cycle. So the birds and the bees, and there's one animal that does something that affects the other species, and how plants are eaten by the animal does this. So there's a whole cycle in nature, right? So it's just explaining the cycle of nature, where from rain food is produced, and from food is what beings eat. All animals and human beings, that's what they eat. So it's talking about your place in nature. We also belong to a natural cycle in nature, and we also have to be part of that cycle in a proper way, in a natural way. And so that is what it's explaining, is that human beings are also part of this natural cycle that exists in nature. So it says in verse number 15, know that action comes from the Creator, and the Creator comes from the changeless. Therefore, all-pervading Brahman ever rests in sacrifice. So basically it's saying that, you should remember that all action comes from the Creator, means Brahma. And the Creator comes from the changeless. Brahma comes from the changeless Brahman, the unchanging consciousness, the bottom, all-pervading Brahman. And from that Brahman is where into which everything resides. So it's like saying, the ocean and the waves, right? So the underlying substratum of everything is the ocean, and from the ocean arises the waves. So the waves, you can think of it as action, as again like a yagya, but that arises from the unchanging, unmoving Brahman, the substratum. So it's like the ocean and the waves. And verse number 16 is, he who does not follow the wheel set in motion is of a sinful life, rejoicing in the senses. He lives in vain, Again, this is the wheel that is set forth in motion. If you see the swastika, it is not a 2D thing, it's a two-dimensional, it's painted in two-dimensional, but you can think of it as a wheel, it's turning. So basically this wheel that is set in motion, it is like the cycle of creation. Everything in creation is a cycle. The creation, sustenance, destruction. Whether it's, if you look at it as a flower comes up, it blossoms, it decays, it falls, then it goes into the ground. From the ground again arises, from the seed again arises a sprout. From those seeds, a sprout arises, from a sprout a tree, and so forth. So everything, if you see in nature, is a cycle. Everything is cyclical. So the wheel that is set in motion. So now if you don't follow the natural cycle, and if humans tend not to, if you do not follow that natural cycle of nature, which is in nature, then you're leading a sinful life. And you have to set yourself back into that cycle. You have to fit yourself back into the cycles that exist in nature. So 17 is, but the man who rejoices only in the self is satisfied with the self, who is content in the self alone. For him, truly, there is nothing more to be done. Now, this is, of course, of a sage. This can be misleading to you, but essentially it is saying that a person who realizes that he is the supreme, that basically essentially he is the self in a human body, and he's so content and in bliss in himself, and so content because he knows that he is eternal. He's everything. Everything is me. There is no duality. And so when that realization comes for them, for those people, there is nothing to be done, because they're not doing from the ego. They're not doing. They know that they're not the doer, which we'll come to here later. But 18 is, he has no interest whatsoever in what is done or what is not done, nor does he depend upon any being for any object. Same thing. And then therefore, so 19, therefore always perform those actions well, which should be done without attachment. By performing action without attachment, one attains supreme. So we've talked about this, we don't have to go to it. Then Krishnji gives an example of Janaka. Janak and others attained perfection by action only. Even with a view of protecting the masses, you should do your action. So that's pretty straightforward. Whatever great man, so he's saying that basically Janak and all these great sages, like I was telling, but even Sri Krishna, they're great examples. So these great examples have set a standard for others, right, of how to be in this world, whether it's kings or whatever. But because he's speaking to Arjun, he's giving an example of Janak, of how King Janak was, and lived by his example. So he's saying, there is nothing in the three worlds that has to be done by me, nor anything unattained that should be done by me. But see, even Sri Krishna, now Sri Krishna here, now I wanted to tell you this. Now, in most of the Gita, when Krishnaji is saying that has to be done by me, and me is a capital letter, and he says, I pervade in all the three worlds, there's nothing to be attained by me, I am everything, and he speaks like this. So this is not the ego personality of Krishna, okay? This is the supreme self speaking through Krishna, the personality Krishna. So when he's speaking like this, it's the voice of consciousness. And that is why he's termed Bhagavan. So Bhagavan is not God, okay? Bhagavan, not in that sense. Bhagavan is a title. Like you have title of Rishi and Swami and so forth. So like Ramana Maharishi is often called Bhagavan Ramana Maharishi, or Bhagavan Rajneesh, I think it was called. But Bhagavan is a title like Rishi or Swami or Guru or so forth, okay? So the title Bhagavan, it literally means that an enlightened person who speaks from the voice of consciousness. So here, because Krishnji is speaking from that voice of consciousness, here you'll say Bhagavan Uvacha. So only in the Gita it's said like that, Bhagavan Uvacha. Bhagavan says, because it is Bhagavan or the consciousness that is speaking. That's why it doesn't say Krishna said, it doesn't say Krishna Uvacha. It says Bhagavan Uvacha because it is not the personality of Krishna. This is beyond name and form. This message is not coming from the mind of Krishna. It's not from his mind. It is like the Vedas. It comes from consciousness. It's directly from consciousness that it comes and it descends. So for you, when you read this and you read these verses where it says that, O Arjun, there is nothing in the three worlds that has to be done by me, nor is there anything unattained that should be attained by me, yet I engage myself in action. So, what I found most helpful is not to think of it as even a voice of consciousness that spoke through our Krishna, but make the Gita personal for yourself. So when you hear these verses of this consciousness speaking, see it as your own consciousness that is speaking. Okay? That will be very powerful for you. So, like verse number 23, it says, if I do not engage myself in action without rest, men would in every way, men would in every way follow my path, O Arjun. So, whenever you read these verses where he's saying, he's talking as the Bhagwan, as the voice of consciousness, see it as though coming from your own consciousness. Okay? And then he goes on, he says, these worlds would perish if I do not perform actions. I would rather be the author of confusion of castes, and I would be the author of confusion of castes and destroy all these beings. So basically he's saying that even the eternal being, the consciousness, is always performing action, because everything would be in disarray if this supreme being did not perform action. So just as the ignorant act from attachment to action, O Arjun, so should the wise act without attachment, wishing for the welfare of the world. So basically that is the attitude that we have come into the world for others. And so you when you come here, you must realize that sustaining the body is for the service of the world, and you should not be attached to what you have and what you attain. There's nothing wrong with attaining it, but do not be attached to people and things, because from that misery arises. See it just as though it is it's a play. And when you're on a stage, the furniture that is there in your house, the people that are in your lives, it is there, it is set a stage, and it is there for you to act in this world. You've come for a short time, and you shouldn't be attached, because you're only on the stage for a little while and then you have to leave. But you've come here to tell a story, you've come here to do certain things. You should know your role. And the main thing why we have come here is to serve others, right? So it's saying, wishing the welfare of the world, and that is why you should act. Okay, 26 is, let no wise man unsettle the minds of... So 26, it says, let no wise man unsettle the minds of ignorant people who are attached to action. He should engage them in all actions, himself performing them well with devotion. So he's just saying that, basically we are not here to, if there are ignorant people in the world who are attached to action, you don't go and start preaching to them, but you lead your actions in such a way that you become an example to them. So you yourself perform the actions well with devotion. Devotion means for other people, for the divine and so forth. Let them do what they're doing, but you set an example for them so that they learn from you, because the best way in which people learn is from people who are living that knowledge, okay, not people who are speaking and correcting you. So that is why it said that even children will do as you do, not do as you say. So that is why he's saying you perform your actions well and let others learn from you. verse number 27 is, all actions are performed in all cases merely by the qualities of gunas. He whose mind is deluded by egoism thinks, I am the doer. Now this is a very important verse, number 27, and this is the crux. I want you to remember this verse because this is sort of the crux of chapter 3, is that I am not the doer. So this is the takeaway. So this is a very deep concept to understand. It's saying that all actions are performed in all cases merely by the qualities in nature, by the gunas. He whose mind is deluded by egoism thinks, I am the doer. Okay, so nature, Prakriti, has three qualities. Everything that exists has these three qualities. Okay, these are the sattva, the purity, or the unaction means the serenity, the peace, and calmness, purity, all the gunas. The sattva has the purity aspect. Okay, then the rajas is the active, the red. It's the active guna. The activity guna, and the tamas is the inactivity, it's lethargy, laziness, and so forth. This is the dark side, that guna. So all of Prakriti has this. So what it's saying is that it is the gunas that are producing certain actions, it's producing certain outputs. So, but what happens is we attach ourselves, we think we are the body and the mind. And when we attach our identity to this body and the mind, we think that we are doing it. See, the spirit, the soul, the consciousness is free from these three gunas. It's above these three gunas. It has nothing to do with these three gunas. It's simply the witness. It is the observer. But the ignorance in us creates an ego personality which thinks that we are the gunas which exist in the mind and body. So the mind has gunas. When the mind is agitated, is rajas. When the mind is peaceful, it's sattva. When the mind is dull, it's rajas, tamas. So same thing with the body. The body can be sattvic, it can be pure, it can be rajasic, or it can be tamasic. So depending on our energy level, depending on our purity level, depending on the combination, sometimes rajas is active, sometimes sattvic is active, sometimes tamas is more dominant. So all these three gunas exist in certain combinations. Sometimes one is 60%, the other is 30%, one is 10%, whatever. There will be some ratio of all of these three gunas happening in your mind and body, because everything that exists has these three gunas. And whatever the combination is and whatever is the more dominant will produce that quality of thoughts and will produce that quality of action from those thoughts. Okay? So what is said here is a very deep thing. Now if you detach yourself from the body and mind and just witness it, or it's like witnessing a third person. Now somebody is very hyper and has a lot of and the mind is all over, and they think a lot, they worry a lot, they do a lot, and they're hyper and all this stuff. That this is rajas, and you observe it. But see how you observe it as a third person, right? It is the same thing, like your soul can observe that, okay, right now my rajas is high. Or when you're calm, you can observe that, it's sattva is dominating. Therefore, my thoughts are like this. Therefore, my actions are like this. But we tend to attach ourselves and think that it is we who are doing. It's not you who are doing. It is these gunas which are acting. And this is a very, very critical point. You must detach and understand. See, like whatever you eat, sometimes you eat something which is a lot of sugar and caffeine, you will start acting hyper. It is because that guna is acting. It is not you. You meaning the soul remains detached. The soul should simply observe and witness that because I ate this thing, I'm acting like this, or my thoughts are like this. So depending on your energy level, sometimes you worry, a lot, because, you have the that guna is active. Or when you're depressed, it's a tamasic guna that is active. So if you can observe it and see that, okay, there might be a cause because of this, that is why this guna is active, and because that guna is active, I'm behaving like this. So that is why, yeah?
Nature then, if I'm thinking about all the time that some guna is active and that is actually the doer, not me. So what is my true nature?
Your true nature is Satchitanand, which is eternal existence, pure existence, Chit, which is consciousness, and Anand, which is bliss, which is the nature of the soul. Now the soul works through an instrument, which is the body, the body, mind, intellect. You need an instrument to function through. These instruments will have certain qualities. Okay, so but the witness, the consciousness, that observer can see that my instrument is off balance, it is like this or that, and you can bring it into balance. And the best state is the sattvic state. The more sattva you have, the more purity you have, the better, because the more calmer you'll be, your actions will be more balanced, you will have positive thoughts, you'll have a pure body, and so forth. So that is why it said in one of the previous chapters, that try to attain a high level of sattva. But you must understand you're a spirit and body, you're not the body alone. Do you get it, or should I explain further?
Yeah, I understand that I'm not the body. I mean, but I think it's deeper, so I think I'm not going to get it right away, so I need to dwell on it. Please carry on.
Yeah, so the thing is, main thing is that, yeah, it is, we read about it, we know it, but how do we achieve it, That's why I said that knowing it is one thing, experiencing it is a second step, and the third step is actually living that existentially, it's an existential experience. So once you read that, there is this, when you sit for meditation and you do a guided meditation, and when you observe the thoughts, there'll be moments where you will realize that I went beyond the mind. And what was it that was observing? What was it that was witnessing? From where do the thoughts come? From where does the intellect come? Where is it that, what is the mind? And that was Ramana Maharishi says, if you read Ramana Maharishi, he says, who am I? What is the mind? And when you trace it, you'll go to a void. You'll go to this eternal sense. You'll feel that expansion of time. And when you sense that bliss, you will know that is your true nature. But that has to come with experience. It has to come through meditation. And the moment you feel it, once you think it, then when you read these verses again, then you'll understand what it was talking about, because you witnessed it, you have experienced it, you know what it is, you know that part of you that is eternal, which is permanent. Okay, so 28 says, but Arjuna, but he, the knower of truth, knows about the divisions of the gunas and karmas, and he's not attached, knowing that the gunas and senses move amongst the gunas. So a person, a wise man who knows, who is established in the self and works through the body, mind, intellect apparatus, he knows that it is the gunas which are acting in the whole creation, which is also made up of all these gunas. So 29 is, those deluded by qualities of nature are attached to the functions of the gunas and karmas and so forth. Okay, I didn't realize we're going to go into chapter 3 in so much detail. Let me see if there's anything, renouncing all actions in me. Yeah, so verse number 30 is again, he's saying, renouncing all actions in me. So you can think of it, let you renounce all your actions into yourself, into your consciousness. So those who constantly practice this teaching of mine with full faith without craving are freed from action. Okay, I'm just quickly going through it to see if there's anything else important. Um, action and this verse number 34 talks about attachment and aversion to sense object. This is very important. So we usually have attachment or we have aversion towards most things in life. So you should not get swayed by them or come under their control. And then we talked about verse number 35 last time. Desire, it is anger born of Rajogun, is all devouring, sinful. Second, as fire enveloped by smoke, and mirror by dust, and emperor by womb, so is wisdom enveloped by fire. Yeah, so verse number 38, it says, as fire is enveloped by smoke. So this is where he's talking about the ignorance, how did it come about? So, he's talking about fire, the inner fire. The fire is enveloped by smoke, a mirror by dust. As an embryo is by the womb, so is wisdom enveloped by that meaning desire and anger. So basically our wisdom is not clear because then it is overshadowed by our desires and by our anger, and that is why we suffer. So wisdom is enveloped by this constant enemy of the wise in the form of desire, which is very difficult to appease as fire. The senses, the mind, the intellect are said to be its seat, though through these it deludes the embodiment of the soul by veiling the wisdom. So here he's talking about essentially what I was saying, that the senses, the mind and the intellect are just its seat. Basically, its seat meaning the soul seat. Through these instruments, it deludes the embodied. We become deluded. The soul becomes deluded that I am this. And so therefore the wisdom is veiled. So controlling first the sensual skills also destroy knowledge and wisdom. So now verse number 42, it says, they say that the senses are superior to the body, superior to the senses is the mind, superior to the mind is the intellect, and one who is even superior to the intellect is he, the Paramatma. And that's the levels of existence we had spoken of much earlier. It's mentioned here. And then thus knowing him who is superior to the intellect. If thus knowing him means yourself, your soul, which is superior to the intellect, restraining the self, the lower self, by the higher self, slay the enemy in the form of desire, who is indeed, it's hard indeed to conquer. So that's, I couldn't go into chapter 4, we'll go into it next time, but I wanted to go into this in more detail because we just did a summary last time of chapter 3. So this chapter 3, it briefly had mentioned yajna, but in chapter 4 we'll go in much deeper into the yajna. But the karma yoga is, all of us are working and we are functioning in this world, we have families and all that. So it's very important to understand how to perfect our karma yoga, because we're all karma yogis, we're on the stage. So we need to understand how to live in this world with maximum output and least repercussions and least consequences. And so it is very important when you act, you must stay established in yourself, and you must know what is dharmic, and you must know what is your true nature, and you must not do anything which is contradictory to a natural process, which is, like I'll give you examples, like how human beings are now polluting the earth. We have broken this beautiful cycle which is in nature. We are cutting down trees, we are doing all these things which are not part of the natural cycle. So we are breaking this natural cycle. So even in our lives, when we break this natural cycle, whether it's in sleeping or eating cycles or the way in which we function in the world as part of nature. You see, the Native Americans and all the native traditions, they very much honor nature and they live in sync with nature. And that's why there are no consequences from it. So this chapter talked a lot about that, being in that rhythm, being in the rhythm with nature, being like nature, just like sun produces and how the rain produces and all of these things that happen, You yourself should be engaged in action to serve others. That is the main takeaway of this thing, that the yajna, the karma yoga, you must know that you have come for service to others. Okay? Any questions?
Hi, Vinita here.
Yeah, Venkat, hi.
I had a couple of questions on um, couple of things. First, let me rephrase this. So the first one is
You're breaking up.
doing actions, right? Doing actions. Audible now?
You're breaking up,
Is this
Venkat.
better? Can you hear me clearly?
Yeah, I'll try. Let's see. Say it again.
Yeah, so the question is, so the first thing is we have to act according to our nature, right?
Correct.
So our dharma. Now, when you mentioned that there are these different gunas who are actually responsible for our thought, and they are the ones that are acting on our behalf, not the soul, right?
Correct.
So how do we connect the two? Being in our nature, how do we act, and at the same time keeping our identity separate and serve from the space of giving it. So if you can give some
Sure.
practical.
So I'll give you basically, like, see, if your nature, okay, your nature is nature, guna and nature is the same thing. So earlier, actually in verse number 4, in chapter number 4, we'll talk about this. So see, you have come to do a certain role in the world. That role is your nature. Okay, some people are, like I said, there are 4 main personality types: scholars, leaders, traders, and workers. So the scholars have more sattva, they have more the sattva guna. The leaders are a combination of rajas and sattva. So they do a lot of activity, but the sattvic portion is the leaders are the ones who contribute to the society because they earn, they are the leaders, they are the administrators. So the combination of 2 gunas, sattva and rajas. The business community, the traders, are mainly rajasic because they're more self, it's more profit for the self, but that's their role. They have to do trade. And the 4th is the workers. The worker class are more the tamas kind because they don't have high intellect or something, but they're more about working with their hands and feet. So when the spirit comes into the world, it comes into the world with a certain role. Some people have a role to lead, whether it's a company or a community or some social, like a non-profit or just a social leader in any aspect of society, whether it's economics or politics or whatever. Now, a trader has come into society for the trade, for keeping the economics functions, the business function, or leading some form of business. That is what he's decided to come as. Now, all of these are needed for society. Each one of these categories are needed for society. But to know what your role is, very few people even know what their role is. They don't even know what their true nature is. Not true nature, but what their guna is, main dominant guna is. Like a scholar, oftentimes what happens is scholars land up in jobs. I mean, they are really they want to know about themselves. They're curious about knowledge. They want to learn more about a certain subject, but they're forced into, because that may not earn them a good salary, so they're forced into jobs which are against their nature. Now they can become a professor, they can become a doctor, they can become anything which is more of an intellectual thing, but you have to understand. And what happens then is that they follow it as a hobby because they cannot earn from it. They pursue it as a hobby, but it is their nature, their guna, that drives their karma. That's the way it's supposed to be. That guna that is in you, that you've come with, which is also because of your past births and because of your karma, and depending on whatever it is that you've accumulated, So if you've attained a certain level of sattva through evolution, you will be born with a high level of sattva, and then you will be interested in knowledge, you will be interested in intellectual things, you will be interested in going to know about who am I and so forth. When you know that guna, and from when you function from that guna, then you will perform the karma according to that guna. But to know that I am here performing this action, and I'm performing this action to be a part of society, to serve other people, not just myself. So knowing that I truly am the self, the eternal consciousness that has taken an incarnation in this world as a scholar, as a rishi or guru or whatever, as teacher, or maybe a scientist, or a lawyer, or whatever it is. And this is the role I've taken on, and this is going to be, I'm going to lead it as a service to society, to serve others, and to be also a part of this world. But always knowing who I am truly, not forgetting that. And it is just like, being on a stage, being an actor. You're given a certain role, you go and fulfill that role on stage, but you know that you're there for a little while, and so you don't get attached to it. So you know your true nature, you act according to the role that you have come for, you act it to serve others, so that you're not attached to it. Did I miss any piece of it? I hope I addressed, because there's several parts of it. So I hope I didn't miss any piece of what you asked.
Yeah, was unmute. Yeah, I'm digesting what you said. A lot of it makes sense. I'll just ponder over it.
Yeah, but it's always a good idea to see Sri Krishna as the example. For me, I'm a big fan of Sri Krishna. So Sri Krishna is one of the greatest examples to us. So if you study his life, if you watch the Mahabharata, and if you see how he led life, he never denied any part of life. He was the perfect child, he was a perfect lover, he was a perfect king, he was a perfect friend, he was a perfect diplomat, he was a perfect everything. So he was fully engaged in this world, but he was not attached to it. He was a king, but he was not attached to it. So if you look at him as a perfect example, you can know, and he even says, right, you look at the example of these other kings. He tells Arjun, look at how Janak was, King Janak was. He was such a wise king. So if you look at Sri Krishna as an example, a lot of this will become very clear. Or how these other people were, like Sage Vashisht and all of these. Depends on what you are, and you can take somebody in our history as an example. If you feel you're a scholar, you can take a perfect scholar as an example. If you feel you're a leader, you can take Krishnji as an example. If you think you're a businessman, you can take a perfect businessman as an example and see how they led their lives.
From our perspective, as we play different roles over a period of time, the four categories that you mentioned, scholars, leader,
Business
worker,
Mm-hmm.
and trader. So we can probably play a combination of these roles over a period of time.
But usually you're born with one dominant nature, one dominant. It can change over time, but usually one is the most dominant. Like some people are both good leaders and they're spiritual, so then they become spiritual leaders, because obviously they are they are the scholars, they're like a guru. But it can also be, see, there are many types. Some gurus, some teachers, they don't want to engage in the world, but some are great leaders as well. But the main nature is that of a scholar. So it's there are subcategories and there's combinations and things like that. I don't know if you've taken personality tests like Brigg-Myers or DISC, DISC. There's all these personality tests that you do at corporate world now. And usually when you take these questions and you mark the answers, there's questions, personality questions, you mark what your answers will be. Just Google it, personality test, Brigg-Myers or DISC, and you will be given some combinations of letters saying this is your most dominant, and then these are the other three, or so, something like that. It's very similar to that.
I'll check it out. Thank you.
Mm-hmm. No other questions?
Hello.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was just hearing to this question, and just overstretching this a bit. As we said, I mean, I understood the concept of one of our gunas being dominant. I was wondering, as we are able to enhance our energy
Mm-hmm.
through whichever way, like satsang we are doing, or uh, and we are bringing more purification.
Mm-hmm.
So is it that we will be able to like move to the higher gradations and like move from our that dominant guna to another, if if like we are more on tamas and
Yeah,
move
yeah,
towards.
absolutely. See, it's not even so like at different times of the day, at different depending on what you've eaten or done or whatever, your guna will change temporarily, right? So there's a predominant guna which is your nature or personality, but that is your sort of your resting state. That's your default state. But even a scholar or a very calm, quiet person, if you give him a lot of caffeine and sugar, he'll start jumping up and down for a little while. He'll get hyper. But yes, a person who is the base or the default state is that of Rajas. He's very hyper, he worries a lot, he can't sit down for 5 minutes, he's constantly got to do something. If he practices meditation or he purifies his mind, which is so and it starts calming down, yes, of course you can move on. That's the whole point of life, is that you need to evolve.
Yeah, exactly. So that's what I was trying to like. That is what the entire work is about. That we can, I mean, I was trying to understand it from the energy focus point of view. Okay, we move the energy a bit by doing all the good work or spiritual side or whatever. So
Yes,
we can
yes.
move up in our life, and that way, I think a bit of karma clearing can happen.
Yes, the karma is a different aspect, but the gunas can obviously change. So if you're Rajo Guna type, you can move to Sattva. So that is what he said in chapter 2. He says, try to move, develop the Sattva, the purification. So that
Yeah.
is definitely there. And that is what it's doing actually. In the Gita, it's going from Karma Yoga to Bhakti Yoga and to Jnana Yoga. It's going from the whole journey is from Tamogun to Sattvagun in the Gita also. From not doing, not wanting to do, to doing, and then to purification and to the Sattva.
Right. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
So if you take a person who's a worker, for instance, let's say he's having a lot of tamasic guna, he can still do practices,
Yeah.
and then change his guna to sattva. But he can still remain a worker because his
Yeah. So the outer action, that so like the outer is recommended depending on what you are in the inner. So like I'll go back to the personality test. Like when a person is in college, and like my son he was in Berkeley and he was given a personality test, and then his counselor said, you'll be good in this and this and this career. So it is a recommendation based on the type of person you are. But if you change, then of course you should change careers. If you still want to do it, it's fine. But the recommendation will change if your nature changes. Yeah. Most of the Gita is very common sense, and you can actually understand it in today's terms. If you understand the concept clearly, then you can relate it. Otherwise, it becomes like a prehistoric document that you can't relate to. So if you understand the concept of the yajna, if you understand what the base principles are, because these base principles are eternal, that's why this knowledge is eternal. It is not time and place based. It's That's a very interesting concept. The Gita is so valuable even today compared to a lot of the Purans and all, because there is knowledge which is for a time and place, and there is knowledge which is for all time and all place. And that is why the Gita is so valuable.
Vinita, I have a question.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, when we are working in the world, can you hear me clearly or is my voice breaking?
No, I can hear you.
Okay. So when we are working in the world, we need to be very passionate, but we are unattached to the outcome of what we are doing.
Mm-hmm.
And when we meditate, when we drop the world, then we need to be dispassionate. Is that understanding right? Between the passion and dispassion?
Yeah, outer action. Yeah, absolutely. Outer action has to be dynamic. You know, you have to be dynamic, smart, you know, extremely skillful. You know, use all the smartness that you can. You have to be dynamic, you have to work, you have to be skillful, and all. You need a lot of energy. But that is, the knowledge for action is very different from knowledge for the mind. A lot of people confuse the knowledge for the mind as knowledge for action. The knowledge for action is completely different from knowledge of the mind. So when you retrieve, it's about not doing. It's going to suspend the activity of the mind, whereas in the outside you have to engage the mind in a skillful manner, in a smart manner, so that you're efficient in the world. So, you know, if you're at work and you know you have to design a database, you have to make a painting, you have to be an administrator, you have to see. But when you recede, you are investing in that intellect, in the purification of the intellect. And so that is from where the ideas will come. From intuition comes intelligence. So the more you feed your intuition, the more you feed your or retrieve the source of creativity, the source of intelligence, the more intelligent you will become. The more intuitive you become, the more intelligence will come from it. So you go to the source, you enlarge the source, and you'll see these people are so intelligent because they've invested somewhere, some time, and then they become very good in the world.
Great, thank you.
Okay? Guess we're done.